morning, everyone, and thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. We got multiple updates today with intel that I hope is helpful. Everybody's on commitment watch today because the fact that Arkansas is among the final four teams for transfer guard out of Jacksonville State. Geron Pierre Jr., 6'5" guard. We've talked a lot about him. I've talked a lot with him over the last couple of weeks. We brought you reporting on a lot of that and stuff that he's told me directly, stuff you're hearing from sources. He confirmed that he has a Final Four of Arkansas, Ole Miss, SMU, and Auburn with an announcement expected today. Now, things can change. He can move that out, I guess. Who knows if that actually lands exactly when he said it would. Good morning from the Montana Razorback Club. We shadowed, do I shadow? I don't know exactly what that said. All right, so I've got an update for you. Arkansas is not recruiting Jaron Pierre Jr. That's coming from somewhere, a place that should know. So we've been putting these videos out talking about what Pierre's told us, his Final Four, other reporters. I've been asking him about visits. He was vague about that on Friday. Then when I got him on Saturday, you know the story. It was not a great call in terms of being able to understand what he was saying. It was a bad connection, whatever. So I asked him how was Fayetteville. He said it was good, but there weren't very many words that were understood on that phone call. So you know all that. I'm just covering what you already know. And so I have said in the last time we did one of these last night, I said, because of how odd this has been, and because I don't have any confirmation that even any paperwork's done to suggest a silent commitment, that I wasn't on board with that Arkansas as a leader. So that's the last thing I said. I later was told that another reporter source told me that he had indicated that he'd been in Arkansas. So I felt like, okay, that's probably enough with everything else I have and what I've heard to go ahead and put out a tweet that he's, been on campus, and as well as Ole Miss, which has been confirmed too. And the decision's expected today. Well, I've since learned a couple of things. One is there were more mixed signals about where he was and where he wasn't. So I made the determination in concert with that, and then finding out ultimately that Arkansas is not in on him, that being put on that list was just being put on that list, which was one of the possibilities I raised. What I'm not sure about was he really on Arkansas's campus or not? There's enough conflicting information for me to take that down, but because now I know that Arkansas is not in the running for him, and that was included in the tweet, I just decided I can't change part of that without just deleting all of it, because it leads to the wrong message. That Arkansas has really got a chance to get him. Now, the debate was Arkansas heavily pursuing him? What I'm told is that the initial contact, which was the first thing he told me that Arkansas had, the first time I spoke with Jaron Pierre Jr. personally, was he told me that Arkansas had been in touch with his agent. He'd only spoken directly with coaches at Kentucky and Ole Miss. Well, Kentucky's out of it. Ole Miss is in the Final Four, and he did visit there Saturday. I'm not going to parse out whether or not he was there Friday and Saturday. The last time we were on here, I told you guys I'm not 100% convinced of that. And so, where it is now, I'm being told that Arkansas has not been in pursuit of him outside of the initial kind of contact stuff and had moved on from it. So that's the latest. So if a commitment announcement comes over today and you hear Arkansas, then there's a major change in the last few, whatever, leading up to it. But don't expect it. I'm told now Arkansas's not in it. So, there are going to people, conspiracy, going to say, well, Arkansas did have him on campus and they're just decided not to get him, and they want that, plausible deniability that he was ever there. I get that. There's going to be some of that because there's been a lot of talk that he was here, including him effectively telling me if he heard what I asked him on the front end of that call. And that part seemed clear when he said it's good, but I wasn't 100% sure, and that's why I gave you all the information and didn't just cut it off there, leaving room for the possibility that maybe there was, but because there's been so much conflicting stuff from what I'm hearing from other reporters about what's being said from his camp, it's at this point where I'm not going to say I'm sold on anything in terms of him being on campus, even though I did tweet today, I confirmed it. Well, I felt like I did. But at the same time, who cares? Arkansas's not in it, so it really doesn't matter. So the speculation can go wild on that. I'm not going to spend a lot more time on it. That's the end of it. I will say this: Arkansas feels really good about its retention throughout the 4 players that are remaining. So it's looking like, how did we miss on him? The way it's framed to me is that we didn't miss on him. That there wasn't a pursuit, a strong pursuit outside of the early contact stuff. And I always told you when he confirmed that Final Four list, we told you who the original reporting was from. David Sisk, who covers Kentucky basketball, his Final Four list. I confirmed it with Geron, and I threw out there that maybe Arkansas's on his list is just that's on his list. We talked about Ewan in his list, and he's visiting Arkansas, and the paperwork's already done, and maybe he just wanted to have a list out. And he's not going to take other visits. He has one planned for Mississippi State after Arkansas. I mentioned you guys. I'll be surprised if that happens. I think at this stage, Arkansas is going to get it sewn up, and he probably never makes Mississippi State, which if he did, means Arkansas was not willing to go where maybe he is now with NIL or something like that. And that happened twice before in the last recruiting cycle, where there were circumstances where a guy was effectively committed, the paperwork's done, get him on campus, all that happened, and Arkansas still passed for one reason or another because they really had better options at the end of the day and had what they needed. So that you just don't know until it goes public how firm it is. But on this situation, we've never said Arkansas is the favorite, that there's a lean there. I told you I've got the source on the paperwork stuff, continue to say there's no paperwork. So all we have is the strength of the young man's Final Four list that he put out and this notion that he did visit because there were stuff coming out that he was on campus. There was some comment that he was seen with one of Arkansas's coaches, and the coach's name was, referenced specifically. And again, the kid told me, as far as I know, based on what I asked him in a bad call, that it was good. The visit to Fayetteville was good. So there's that. There's been a lot of conflicting stuff, though, where other reporters are starting to feel like maybe, there's been some misdirection with some stuff. I can't speak to that for certain because I didn't hear those conversations. I wasn't in on those. I was only on the ones I had with Jaron Pierre Jr. But now I'm told not only is Arkansas not going to be the announcement, but they really haven't been pursuing him hard. So, and the notion is, if that's the case, then he wasn't on campus, right? If they're not recruiting him, why would he have been on campus? So make of it what you will. So I do have some other intel for you. Obviously, we know Malik Ewan is expected in today. Nothing has changed there. I told you guys that I had source information from someone who would know, and I've repeated it after first bringing it up a few episodes ago, maybe a week ago, that Arkansas will have as many as up to 4 visitors over the next 2 weeks. Well, and I can't speak to who was on campus this weekend, and I can't tell you who's coming up, other than what I can say is, in addition to you in Arkansas, it's expected to have at least one more visitor in the coming days. So this week, and maybe by midweek, as many as 2. So the 4 over the next 2 weeks, I'm now, squeezing in on new intel. This is really good information. Unless something changes, Arkansas, outside of Ewan expected in today, will have another visitor. Now, I can't say more than that. I can't. We may just not play next season. I think so. Arkansas will have another visitor this week. So keep an eye on that. The Nick Pringle situation, I have no reason to think as of now that there's anything shaky with him in Arkansas. You do wonder why the delay on an announcement. And again, always reference back what the 2 things that happened last year. Arkansas upgraded catch and release on one committed player that had been on campus and had done the paperwork to enroll. And the other one was about NIL and already having priority 1 at the same position and another backup in the wings. And you ended up getting Trevor in Brazil as a result of that. So in each case, Calipari made the right calculation, the right move. The rest of them, it all worked out according to plan. So it looks like Ewan and Pringle are headed that way, but keep an eye on other things. Again, there's another visitor this week. maybe by midweek. Again, I can't say who. I can't go there. I can't talk about what happened this weekend now. But I will tell you, in addition to that, a former Calipari player at Kentucky, a big man, a center, he's a sleight of build kind of guy, was there for a couple of years, transferred to Kansas State in the portal season, on Yensu, 7-footer again. He's when you're thinking of Big Z, a 7-footer that's not filled out. He may not be that frail, but Onyenso's not a heavy guy. He's not a banger type, but he's a big time rim protector when you look at his minutes. So under Calipari 2 years ago, Onyenso played about 18, 19 minutes per game and blocked nearly 3 shots per game. Think about 3 shots. That's 1 every 6 minutes. So all you have to do is double his minutes to per 36, looking at 18 plus, go to per 36, and he was blocking nearly 6 shots per game per 36 minutes, excuse me. So he's a productive shot blocker. He's not a big time rebounder. But this season at Kansas State, his minutes, instead of, you would think maybe he's going to have a bigger role than he had at Kentucky at 18.6 minutes. This year, only 11 minutes per game. He's not a big scorer at Kentucky, and it is 18 minutes, less than 4 points per game. This season at Kansas State, and 11 minutes per outing, less than 3 points. The rebounding numbers were down. The shot blocks were down only because he didn't play as much. So, if you were comparing it per minute, it's probably pretty similar. But I'm told to just keep an eye on that one. So keep an eye on that one. And you've got a name there. That's more intel, right? I can't tell you how it's all going to land until it does. I can tell you what looks good, what I believe are private and silent commits based on how it worked out last year. And with the paperwork and all that stuff, you've got all that. You've got Ewan confirmed coming in today for a visit. You know that you're going in the right direction. I really think, like going back to Lamar Wilkerson, Jaron Pierre Jr. I know in both cases, Arkansas was involved, but to what extent? I think a lot of that's coming down to from the way it looks to me now, and seeing this better, is that the retention part is so heavily toward the backcourt. Trevor Brazil's the only front court piece you really have when you look at that, plus what you did bringing in 5 stars out of the high school part of it. It's all backcourt and wings. Darius Acuff and Malik Thomas, we told you those guys are going to have significant roles from day one. You're getting DJ Wagner back, it looks like to me. We know that he's going to have a heavy role in that backcourt. That's part of your retention. We've said that's important. We can't have it both ways and say, well, that's important, but you really wish he'd move on. No one's ever said that. What we've talked about is if you're going to go after a Pierre or a Wilkerson, he makes the most sense as someone that might, and that because he's also not a part of your obvious solution to 3-point shooting, whereas other backcourt guys might be. But it gets crowded. I mean, Carter Knox is a guy that as he continues to develop and improve, he can help you at the 2 some. He can maybe play some more of the 3-4 small ball. You hope not too much of that. He's really good at the wing with a couple other guards on the court with him. And then you've also got, obviously, Billy Richmond III, that not only is a wing, but has also helped with some on-ball stuff. So you've got a lot of roles and hats being worn by some really talented guys you're retaining and 5 stars you brought in. So would you like to have another backcourt player that can knock down shots? And remember, I made the comparisons and contrast in a role like that between guys like Pierre and Wilkerson, or say a Duke Miles, who maybe you could get and bring in. I don't know how many minutes you could even promise him or what he was looking for in the portal. Remember, he was in, we talked about him. And while we were talking about him on one of these segments, it broke while we were on that he committed to Virginia, and he's already backed out of that commitment. I don't know what's happened with him since. I just use him as an example. So I'm not looking as much right now based on what's going on here, hearing this about Pierre. The way it's being framed to me, this is not something that Arkansas has been serious about with him. And if that's the case, that means that one of the options I threw out there with his Final Four list was Arkansas is just in there for fluff. And it sounds like there's been a lot of misdirection about where he was, including if he's telling folks, and based on my conversation with him, if it didn't happen, then that, something odd going on there. Get 5 portal guys, then Malik potentially decommits. Yeah, I mean, don't think that Arkansas is not having those conversations with players that they're trying to retain and guys that they signed. They understand what they've promised, what roles they're trying to deliver, and how that's going to work. It's natural to say, well, this guy could just slot in where Nelly was. Yeah, but Nelly didn't have a Malik Thomas. He didn't have another two guard really. That he would be taking minutes from. So that was that part of it. We always talked about more than one part of it. Why this might sound like it makes sense, but consider this or consider that. I still think at the end of the day, whether Anyenso comes into the picture, and that means, if that happens, what's going on with either Pringle or Ewan? Is that a CYA thing? Are you just saying, look, we're going to give you NIL and you're going to have some kind of depth role here, and we'll have two other bigs? Would you go with three bigs like that? Plus Brazil. That's something Arkansas didn't have last year. They had Big Z, they had Jonas Adu, and they had Trevor Brazil. Thero was a 3-4 combo. He was never a guy that slotted as a 4-5. But if you had Brazil as a 4-5 and those other three, let's say it's Anyenso, Ewan, and Pringle, for example, then you've got four guys that can slot in at the 5. Or maybe a guy like Anyenso or a Keyshawn Murphy or somebody else that's in the portal is there. Some of these guys you would think would have bigger roles, and there's no way you're going to get Ewan, Pringle, and someone like that. But maybe there's an idea where you're looking to change the dynamic a little bit, and you have someone else in line in lieu of a Ewan or a Pringle for whatever reason. Again, those things happened on last year's roster build. It's not a new concept. It's not grasping for straws to help explain why, well, if we don't get this guy we think we're getting, that's a convenient excuse. No, that's what happened last year. It happened. I've ad nauseum gone over the examples. The two out of the 8 that you did the same exact procedure, you got 9 guys. Brazil was a little different because he didn't have to visit. He was already a campus guy. So 8, it all worked out the same way. There might have been a little bit of differences in timing of things, but it always played out. Public commitment came after private, paperwork, visit. So that all happened. So again, he could change how he does it this time. And I mentioned this. Arkansas didn't have any players out of the portal that went and visited elsewhere after they visited Arkansas. That was it. And we knew it would be it because they'd already privately committed and the paperwork had been done. Could there be a different pathway now? Is Calipari going to be okay with having Ewan in today and tomorrow, whenever he leaves, and go ahead and take that Mississippi State visit? I would say if he goes on that visit, that probably means Arkansas didn't want to go. Maybe where some of these teams are now still trying to get him with NIL and they've got their valuation range, something like that. I don't think it would be because they're picking some other place over John Calipari and what Arkansas can do in NIL. They're not going to lose for that. And you can't lose a player who you're not willing to go above what you value them at, because you've got your money in roles designated for guys you're retaining and guys that you brought in from the high school ranks. And even though frontline really doesn't apply to that outside of Trevor Brazil, and he's really a 4, you're still going to slot guys a certain way. And there's other guys still going in the portal. I mentioned Anyenso as one example. You're running out of time. Portal closes on the 22nd. That's next week, just over a week. So what's that? Yeah, you don't want to repeat. Jessica Davis said she didn't want to repeat of last year where Arkansas's woeful from 3 or struggling from 3. Agreed. That's something we've talked so much about. Should have went all in on Wilkerson. Look, at some point, I hope I can talk more about some of this stuff. I always told you guys that thing was going to come down to NIL. And you got these agents involved, and sometimes, it's just at the end of the day, the NIL, where people are on the NIL is based on what the role is going to be too. If you've got a guy that teams need, like Kentucky may be closing on Wilkerson. He was with Pope, seen with Pope this weekend on his visit, pictures, all that. But they have needs based on guys they have to replace. Arkansas is trying to retain a bunch of backcourt guys. And back in November, they signed 2 top 10 5-stars. They didn't sign those guys on telling them, hey, by the way, we're going to be recruiting a guy that's got 3 years of college experience that, is competing for your minutes heavily for that kind of role that we're telling you you're going to have, which is why you sign with us. I understand all that. And the reason I said it would always be about NIL is because that NIL price tag is also in line with the expected role. And if you don't need that guy for that full role, you don't need to be paying him that much NIL. You're better served figuring it out another way. And that's why I said it would always come down to that. Geron Pierre Jr., I heard outrageous NIL starting stuff for him. I haven't talked about that, but that's what I was hearing on the front end. I thought, based on the way I was hearing that, I thought surely he doesn't really expect that. And these other teams that are serious about him, there'll be a stopping point for some of them as well. I know it will with Calipari. So that always gave me some skepticism about, what is reality even for him? Because some of these price tags you're hearing, you're like, man, I can't believe that's real. All right. So, whether it's Pierre though, or Wilkerson, it's the same thing. What can you really promise them in terms of role? And then if you can't, then you're not going to be delivering on those bigger price tags that they can command somewhere else. And that's smart. Why would you overpay for someone that you're not going to have that kind of role for? Or burn a bridge and lose out on a guy that you'd already signed by doing that. That's a sure way to signal that the greatest recruiter of all time is losing his fastball in recruiting. So you've got to do this the right way. You've got to land it the right way. And I understand people are looking around the board and they're saying, look at all these players Kentucky's getting and all these other places. That's just one example. And you're right. They're getting really good players. But most of those places don't have the retention options that Arkansas has. They would love to be able to recruit out of the portal guys like Carter Knox or Billy Richmond III or Trevor Brazile. Imagine if Trevin went in the portal with what he was doing the last third of the season. That Arkansas staff feels really good about what he did. I can promise you there's a feeling there that he was as good as anybody at his position and what he brings to the table as anybody in the country toward the end of the year. I mean, so you're building around that. What have we said? We're not just making stuff up as we go. I've said all along, at the end of the day, last year you got effectively 2 portal players. You might get 3 this time. If you get 4, that means someone probably left. I've also entertained the idea, well, you could expand to a 12 deep, 2 of those being back-end guys that may or may not factor into much of anything in Seeley and Artal in year 1, maybe more development, and go from a true 9-2 to a 10. You could do that. And I don't know if it ends up going that way. But at the end of the day, if you're retaining 4 and you're bringing in the 4 we know that are signed, and you've got to get a couple of big men, you're only getting 1 more guy. So in total, you may get 3 out of the portal. So you didn't need to have as many and just coming off the board right and left. And we got used to that with the previous regime as well. So there's some of that that's built in. It's like muscle memory. You're like, why aren't we? Why hasn't it happened yet? Yeah, I get it. It's almost mid-April. You'd like to know something. There's been no public announcement on retention. There's been technically no commitment yet. So bear all that in mind. I get that, but you're only going to end up with 3 probably. And again, if you go to 4, it means they expanded the roster. But if they do that, it's not going to be feature kind of players anyway. You're in terms of those those next 1 or 2 after you get these 2 big men. Yeah, Kentucky had about 7 or 8 guys leave, and I know Arkansas has 5 out, right? 2 to the NBA draft, 2 ran out of eligibility, Big Z to Illinois. But Arkansas is not also carrying as much in depth that they're going to play, right? And guys that they add. So if you're retaining 4, and let's just say 2 of the 4 you signed are your rotation guys, because that's what we're saying. So the 4 retention plus those 2, that's 6. If you only go 9 or 10 deep in your true rotation, 9 deep, that means 3 more, right? Get 2 bigs. The math still works the same, no matter how we get there and explain it. So and it looks to me like Ewan's a done deal. We'll see about Pringle. I still believe he's a private commit. I've confirmed that his paperwork's done. All that stuff. I got to a point, and I mentioned this the last time we were on, where I felt like I'd heard enough to believe that he'd been on campus already. I've heard something else since then, that tells me maybe that's not true. So we said all along we were hearing that, we weren't sure. I think the last time I was on, I said I felt closer to believing that he was probably there, although I hadn't 100% confirmed it. I'm at a place now where I'm not even sure Pringle's been on campus, but the paperwork's done. And remember, that always happens anyway, typically before they get on campus. So, we'll see on that. But it doesn't make me feel any less good about him. I still think it's heading toward landing him. Acuff didn't come here to sit, neither did Malik Thomas. So that's where we are right now, 25 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. Lot going on today. So headlines, just real quick before I give you another nugget of intel. Let's do the nugget of intel first. Let's just get that out of the way on Ament. It's, we're still in wait mode, obviously. During the Nike Hoop Summit, he did an interview with Kristen Peak, who I believe is with 247 Sports. She's with one of the outlets, the national recruiting outlets. And he said he was a week or two away still he's been looking at portal stuff. He's still a week or two away. So that's what he said. All right. There were rumors he might commit on Friday of last week. I mentioned I'd heard those, and I wasn't convinced of any time frame other than it might happen soon. Well, that's, in real time, a week or two, I couldn't even grow a full beard probably in a week, maybe in two. But whatever, I still don't have a grasp on where it's going. So that's not the intel. What I will tell you is I've been saying, what I do know is once I found out Arkansas's NIL offer, you already know this part, it was really, really good. And then I told you that Arkansas still had wiggle room with that if they felt the need to. So the new intel is this. What I've also been saying is, but what I don't know is it got to a point with all this smoke for Duke. Does Arkansas already know that it's out of the running? And now we focus on portal moves because they already know they're out. The intel today is that from what I'm gathering, Arkansas feels like it's still in it. Arkansas still feels in the mix for now until something else happens to change that. Then we'll come on and say that. But for right now, I think Arkansas is still in it to win it. So that's not saying that that he's a lean to Arkansas, that Arkansas is the favorite. Only that my perspective now is that Arkansas has not been informed that they're out of the Nate Ament. Ament's Hoop Summit performance did nothing to increase his appeal. Okay. Yeah, he didn't have a good Nike Hoop Summit game. He didn't play a whole lot in the second half, did he? So, and we talked about that the other day when we're kind of, recapping what Acuff did and some other players. Ament was not on the court with the starters to finish the game or in overtime. So that's true. All right. 20 minutes in. So you got the nugget on Nate Ament. That is intel for you. If you were wondering, does Arkansas already know that they're out of it? No. You know now that they don't. That doesn't mean they're getting him. Acuff, 24 points, 9 of 14 from the field, including 4 of 8 from 3, made both of his free throws. I had him with 5 assists, 2 rebounds, and a steal. He made huge plays in overtime. He had an assist, a steal, a defensive rebound, and 5 points in a 10-2 run to open the overtime period. So you go from the game tied up after blowing a big lead, going into overtime. Again, Acuff, 5 points, assist, a steal, a defensive rebound, and a 10-2 run. He was effectively the catalyst to putting that game out of reach early in overtime. And then from there, Team USA kept getting fouled, making free throws, coasted the rest of the way, won by 10. So we've kept saying Acuff's not just a productive guy and a big producer and a stud on the court. I always watch what are guys doing at the end of games when it's nut cutting time, when when the sphincter is starting to squeeze up and get tight. What is he doing? What are you doing then? He showed us, didn't he? Yeah, someone mentioned J.J. Andrews. Just a reminder. Well, let's run through the intel first. Arkansas's out on Geron Pierre Jr. That's over. And the way it's been framed to me is they really haven't been in it other than the initial contact, and they moved on. Make of that what you will. just saying it one more time, everything I've gotten since he confirmed that, I've always thrown in the caveats that, is he just keeping Arkansas's name on there as fluff? This secretive mixed signals on the visit, and poor quality phone call, and all this stuff. I mean, did we ever really cement that? I felt like, maybe he was there, but not recruiting him. So that's the intel there. Just repeating it for the last time today. We're going to get out of here just over 30 minutes now. Arkansas not only will have up to 4 visitors in this 2-week span that began this past weekend, and though I can't deliver names other than Malik Ewan, who we all know, and I confirmed and reported a few days ago would be here for a Monday visit, the Arkansas will have a second visitor, expected to have a second visitor this week. So as soon as this week, and maybe by midweek, maybe right on the heels of Ewan. So we're paying attention to that. We'll see if any of that leaks out. I can't. If it leaks out, I'll confirm that but I've been asked not to, so I'm not. Onyenso, keep an eye on him. The former Calipari center who transferred after his sophomore season, was at Kansas State with a smaller role this past season. Entered the portal today. I'm told keep an eye on that. So let's just keep an eye on it. Let's see, let's see what happens with that. And then we'll connect dots as we go. I mentioned yesterday, and I didn't say this again, but Kamani, different spelling than our Kamani Johnson, but Kamani Hamilton, and obviously Hamilton spelled differently than Johnson. So first and last name, different spellings. We want to be correct, but a 6'6", 6'7", could be that 3-4 kind of guy. Played at High Point the last couple of years, 13 points, just under 5 rebounds per game, couple of assists, 52% field goal shooter, 32% from 3 on low volume, 72% free throw shooter at High Point. Transfer tapes, a Twitter account reported that Arkansas, Kentucky, USC, a bunch of other high major teams have been in contact with the High Point forward since he's been in the portal. So we talked about that a little bit. Let's see if anything happens with him moving forward as we look at maybe more frontline help in addition to 2 big men. Maybe that's where it goes now, especially when you consider that, again, if Arkansas, part of the intel was they're feeling really good now about the retention, and plus what you got in the high school signing class, it's just a loaded backcourt and wing spot. And so maybe, the more glaring issues, which are obvious beyond 2 centers, is maybe another forward and a backfill behind Brazil there. And then, I mentioned last night that Cal, the source I had during midweek or whatever, telling me, hey, I'm hearing Cal may try to come out here. I didn't see him. He wasn't part of the, if he'd have been there, I'm sure USA Network would have panned to him. They panned to some other folks in the crowd that were there, and they didn't. And usually Calipari puts out something on social media when he does something like that. When he's at a game, they make sure something gets out, and that didn't happen. So I can't say for sure he didn't go, but I don't think he did. And I mentioned that on our segment last night. 34 minutes in almost. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. We're going to break back in with anything we need to today. We're going to do as many of these as it takes to get you the correct information about where things stand with Arkansas, as much as we can say. So there it is. Until next time, thanks for being here, and I'll see you then.